Okay, got it.
And I think in whatever language it was, the Dubček means the hole that you put the screw in. That's called the Dubček.
Interesting, yeah. Well, we can look at the world as full of screws or full of holes ready to be screwed. In a way, it's looking at the thing itself or the thing that's around the thing itself that describes it. So in a way, the screw hole, being a threaded hole, describes the screw, where it was, it left its imprint, it's all there, all of its history and everything, right down to the scratches on the side of the screw will be imprinted in that screw hole. And it's interesting that in nanotechnology, and Mr. Keshe talks about the holes and the nano layers and the gaps and holes. And it turns out that the holes are important, or is as important as the actual matter level things. You can create electrical current with holes, simply moving holes around in a material rather than the electrons. Interesting idea. Okay, well, let's kind of begin here. Does anyone have something they would like to present to start today's rather belated starting show? Let's see what's been going on. We have the 3-disc reactor combo that's been discussed recently by Mr. Keshe, brought up as a new type of way to experiment. Probably a few other items have come up along the way. Got an experimental setup that I was beginning to play with here, but it's been a very busy week. I just haven't had time to do anything of any consequence. But let me let's see, my picture is going haywire here. Just a minute.
Did you and Mr. Keshe coordinate that, where you showed that saw with the magnets on it in the let's say vertical position? Mr. Keshe showed floating magnets in the horizontal position spinning. I thought that was a similarity.
Yes, that was quite a coincidence. I don't know if he saw the show and saw my device, or just happened to. I noticed he also made, when he drew the circle of the disc, and he put 6 magnets on there, and that's the 6th that I've been working with for years, basically, with this turbine thing and 6 magnets around, and I used 6 other repelling magnets to engage the two the fields of the turbine and any external attachment that I wish to put on, whether it's a generator or something that spins with the magnetic field. But those 6 magnets, I found 6 work best, not 2, 3, or 4, or 5, but 6. 7, more than that doesn't work, but 6 works, and the fields are able to engage in between each other, sort of like that. Even though normally, if you tried, I just explained this before, since they're in repel mode, like north to north or south to south, doesn't matter, and they're in repel mode, you try to push them together, they just repel, and they won't go toward each other. They want to go, they'll slip to the side. And once they slip to the side, they just totally engage and lock into place at a certain point, at a certain distance that's perfect. There's no strain this way. There's no engagement pulling toward. There's no pushing away. There's only engagement of the fields without any matter level stuff touching in between. So it's just sort of a gap between the fields, and when one turns, the other turns. They turn with each other. So it's interesting. He had six little sort of magnets on that diagram he drew. So, and also if you look at the, I also noticed though, if you look at that Russian video that came out recently, we've given links out a couple of times. Someone put it in the chat if they can find it there, or I could find it. If you look at the bottom disk, let me just grab it here so we have the link so we can see what I'm talking about. Where are we here? There it is. Okay, this is one of them, at least one of the videos, and I'll put it in the chat here. And if you, I don't want to show the video, I wish I could. I need to get permission from the author. It'd be nice to be able to show it here. But if you look at that video, which is in Russian, I don't even know how to pronounce the name of the video. It's from Alexei Chekurkov, his YouTube site. And basically it shows a saucer-like object about maybe yay big, and it's got a rotating disc on the bottom and on the top with little motors that rotate the disc. The one on the bottom has 6 magnets, 6 ring magnets actually attached to it, and the ring magnets spin on the bottom, and the top disc spins and also has a high voltage DC, pulse DC charge, like static type charge on the upper plate. And the lower plate also has AC, I believe, higher voltage AC charge going through it. And according to the inventor, Alexei, it produces the interaction of the fields, the crossing of the electric and magnetic fields produces a gravitational bubble, you could say, that enables the device to act independently of gravity. And the fields around the device also affect cell phones and other communications and so on, which would make sense with a high voltage kind of, basically like a Tesla coil type setup. He has wires going to it as the thing is hovering about 3 meters over the ground, or in one case hovering inside of a living room arrangement. He's got 4 videos. You can go to his YouTube channel and look at the latest 4 videos, and the last couple he explains how it all works and gives a wiring diagram of the devices that are used, and the whole pretty much lays it out. So that's interesting. That's come up in the last month or so, I guess, and it's he seems very sincere. You never know about this sort of thing, but he does seem very sincere. He's got all the buzzwords that I've heard over the years, and the counter-rotating fields of the electric and magnetic, or what we call the magnetic and gravitational, seems correct. Could it be so simple? Well, it's simple, but it's not necessarily easy. Even for him, it can take an hour or more of fine tuning with his device, even when he knows how it all works, in order to get everything exactly right to create the hover effect. So anyway, what I was experimenting with and along those lines is back in the back area here of table part of lab. Let's see, how can I show that? I think I could drag the whole thing over here, and that's probably the best way. This is one of those work in progress kind of deals, but could be of interest to somebody or another. Okay, so yeah, it should come. A few things attached, but that's okay. They're not needed. With a new way of doing things here. Okay, move that. And just do one more camera rearranging. Alrighty, well, you'll get the rough idea here. I might have to level things out or do something. I don't know. We'll see here. But what I've got is a disc, aluminum disc, saucer, you might say, but aluminum disc. This is the basic star formation. It's called configuration with the balls and so on, but I'm not going to use that at this point. I just have this set up because it was handy for what I want to demonstrate here. So what I've got is the aluminum plate, and what I've got up here is a little I'm not getting very good light. Hang on a second, let me turn my this might be better. So this is a little it's called a mini Tesla coil. You can buy them, they're fairly cheap, under around $10 or $20 on the internet. And you have to put it together, solder it together yourself, and so on. It's powered by 15 to 24 volts here. And it's got the Tesla coil, fine wire coil here, which is called the secondary coil. And it's got a little primary coil down the bottom there, that single piece of red wire, single coil of red wire on the bottom is what powers this Tesla coil here. So when the pulses come through on the bottom wire, it's magnified by the transformer-like properties here. And I could show you briefly what happens when I plug it in. Got it plugged into a power supply here. And let's see, is that working right now? There we go. Okay, so I can hear the interference. Put it right up close to the microphone, you can hear. So you see the little sparky thing at the top here. It's like the plasma arc that's coming off the Tesla coil. And it's a little LED in the bottom to let you know it's working. And the whole cool idea about this is you can also input sound through this port here and actually hear the sound through the Tesla coil. I'd have to be able to set that up here. I don't have that set up right now. I can only run this briefly because it heats up really fast. But what I'm doing is I've got that set up here. And so I'm able to input the, I'll get the Tesla coil going. I've got it set up so it just touches on the, you can't really see it there, I guess. Maybe you can hear that. So we can hear that hitting on the spark is adjusted so it's got a little gap in between the wire and the pan. So it's jumping the gap right now. Maybe if I turn the lights off, you'll be able to see that. With the computer, and the other LED, it's very difficult. But just a second here, I'll take you on a little journey and see if we can have a look inside there. Yeah, you can almost see, but it's oh, this one's better. Yeah, there you can see the arc going to the. Now if I'm quiet, maybe you'll hear it too.
Yeah, now we hear it on and off.
Trying to adjust it to the point where it's happiest. I think right about. Anyway, I have to put sound into it and have it actually make. Oops, sorry, I wasn't showing it there properly. I have to put sound into it and have it actually start producing sound against that aluminum pan, and I expect I'll be able to get the pan to resonate at certain frequencies at least. And that's part of what I wanted to do. And then I thought I would even put some water inside the pan, have that vibrate, resonate at certain frequencies. I'd be able to tell which frequency is optimum in terms of resonance and patterns that form. And once that's sort of set up in a resonant way, the way I wish, I'm hoping that that will help interact with a lower plate in the apparatus that I'll set up. And even the possibility of another aluminum plate that's able to have, for example, I can where are those magnets? Oh yeah, remember. There they are, just a second here. So I can, for example, use these neodymium magnets here and put one on one side of the aluminum pie pan and one on the other side so they stick together. Now I've got a magnetic part of this of this disk. And if I have it rotating on a central point here, then I'll be able to spin this. I could have, say, 6 of those, or 12 or more. The whole thing could be covered with little magnets as far as that goes, and make it all magnetic, like a big magnetic plate. And that would be the bottom rotating magnetic field that would interact with the upper rotating electric field. And so we have a crossing of the two fields in between. And that might be where the action is in a way. Now, this is all matter level stuff. I'm not really interested in going there, but it's just a demonstration of what it looks like on the matter level. And how do I replace different items? Like, we don't need rotating magnets. We can have a rotating magnetic field. That can be created in various different ways, whether it's with ganses or with coils or some other rotating magnetic field. The upper disk doesn't have to be a Tesla coil necessarily. Maybe there's another way of creating the gradient that's required to create the field, the upper field, and interact with the lower field. So it's a matter of replacing the matter level stuff with the more efficient, higher realm of materials, or lack of materials, which is even better. But if you look at that, the Russian experiment there with the discs, interesting because of ultimately, even though he shows high voltage and rotating magnets and this kind of thing, and a lot of, two rotating motors involved and all this stuff, wires going to it from his ground-based wiring assemblies that are producing the high voltage and so on. So it's not wireless that way. But there it is floating in the air, and he tugs on it with the wires, and it floats around and kind of finds its positive position. There's wind blowing and so on, but it's staying in one position. It sort of varies maybe a little bit, but it's fairly stable once it's actually up there. And he cuts the power to the unit, and down it falls from the air. So there's something to think about. And of course, we've been exploring other realms of how to create lift and so on over the years with the Keshe Foundation teachings. But on the other hand, we've seen in the last Knowledge Seekers workshop these the light created by the Chinese group that are working on creating lift and power, and apparently light. So perhaps a system like this could also be used to create that spark of light in the central part of the reactor between where the plates are acting, and create a dynamic field there that would essentially, with the pulses, these plates would be acting like a capacitor essentially, and the charge between them is dynamic, and having a GANS ball of some sort, or one of these other reactor balls perhaps, in the middle might very well light up that ball. So that would be interesting to work with that as well. So anyway, any ideas or questions on that? And get my get the light back on here. Does that make any sense, or is it completely wacky for people and too much of the matter level stuff from 1920s or something? Okay, let's try and see if there's any comments in.
Rick, this is Marshak. I
All
have
right,
some.
Masha. Mm-hmm.
I have some observation that I want to talk a little bit about in terms of um, uh, field, detecting field.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you know, I have this device which I can adjust things, and so I had other people kind of come and feel the field and how it moves and adjusts and all that. One of the most interesting thing is human as detector. And one of the things we noticed that um, the right hand is better at gravitational, left hand is better at magnetical.
Well, isn't that what the Sufi dervish dancers also discovered?
I don't know whether they talk about gravitational or magnetic field.
There's
But
one hand that goes to the heavens and one hand that goes to the earth, right? And
yeah, that's true.
you become the conduit in between. You are the lightning rod. You become the lightning rod between the absolute and the matter level, the physicality.
Isn't that sorry? Isn't that usually right hand gives and left hand takes?
Yes.
And I say usually. This may be just from a social habit, or who knows.
So the main thing is the other aspect is which I think Mr. Keshe does not want me to talk too much about it, but I will just briefly mention something. Is that since we can detect the fields using our hand, we can adjust the detection point, and this I have some evidence of that as well. Is that as a detector, we are dynamic in the sense that what we wish to detect, in a sense, dictate our sensitivity in the certain range of gravitational and magnetic field. And by adjusting things, you can notice that we do have the capacity as a detector, no other thing, but just from the point of view of detecting the field or seeing the changes in the field from one position to another. It is actually quite tangible. But the thing is that if I'm in a hurry, I can't do it. I have to come down quite a bit. And sometimes, at one point I changed something and I was not detecting any field. And then I said, what happened? But I was too anxious about it. So I was not detecting anything. Then I said, okay, let me think about it. And then I came back to the room. As I was walking in the room, I could feel the field, not only in my hands, but also the butt. And the interesting part is that the fingertips are very sensitive to the fields. At first I thought it was the palm, but my sister, who is also involved in this, she was talking about her fingers feeling heavy or vibrating and things like that. And then I noticed that yes, it is true that the fingertips are quite sensitive in detecting the fields. And so these are some thoughts in terms of as we experiment with things. I think it's much better than I have those electrical things that beeps and that John showed. And I think we are better than any of the things that I have right now in terms of detecting or seeing where the changes are happening. So anyway, that's some of my observation as I have something to play with now. And so any thoughts, any suggestions?
Well, that's a good point, definitely. And the fingertips, I mean, traditionally the fingertips are sensitive. There's nerve endings there. They've discovered recently that our fingerprints are actually very essential as part of the being sensitive to the sense of texture on surfaces and so on. because it gives off a vibration when the texture of the surface goes across the fingertips. It stimulates those nerves at a certain frequency, and it's a low frequency in the generally below 20 hertz or something like that. So it's basically in the same range as our brainwave frequencies. So the sense of touch might actually be tuned to the same range as our brains, but we just don't use it normally for, we don't touch someone's brain to feel their brain waves, or sometimes we might feel someone's vibes though with their hands, you might say, like, and if someone is maybe too aggressive or coming onto you too hard, you go, whoa, like back off, like using the hands as if those fields were too strong. You're feeling the fields are too strong, you're pushing back against those fields or something, if in a some kind of severe situation like that, I suppose. But also, the fingertips are, you could be in a dark room and not be able to see anything. You can still, with your hands and palms, feel objects and so on. You can feel, well, just in the physicality around the temperature differences alone, which is, in a way, a measure of plasmas, of the activity of a plasma, whether it's hot or cold is the activity of all the atoms jumping around in there, whether they're excited or not excited. You can feel that, as not just with the fingertips, but with your back, for example. You can use that as a lens, as a sensing lens, you might say. And it's interesting you mentioned, Mashfaq, about this tunability, I guess you could say. Once you focus on feeling the fields, whatever that means to you, then you can amplify that by continuing that practice and adding more detail to it as you go along and becoming more sensitive. And then, like you said, you become sensitive to when you can't feel the fields. You go, wait a minute, what's going on here? And that usually means you have to assess what's going on. Either is there something changed in the environment, or is there something changed, and more likely in my internal environment? What is it that I've got going on that's interfering with my ability to be present in this moment and feel the fields? Because you have to be feeling the fields is not something that occurred a few minutes ago or in the future. It's something that occurs in the now, and you have to be present in order to feel those fields. But yet we have all these things that tug on us, I've got to do this and I'm late for that, and I'm having all these stresses at work today that my brain's trying to work out, and blah, blah, blah. Endless list of things that can interfere with our ability to be in that, what could be called simple presence state, that state of just being present in the moment without having to do things or to be a certain thing, and all of that, which end up interfering with the ability to just sit there and sense the fields, to actually engage in that process of active sensing 100% of the environmental fields that are active in that moment. And it sounds kind of easy, but in a way it could be, like the end of 20 years of meditation. You might be able to be at that point of feeling the fields, or maybe someone else that's gone through some kind of extreme stressful situation that tuned up their nervous system so much that they can feel fields wherever they go. And other people might be gotten oversensitized to maybe the cell phone fields and that kind of thing. And now they're super sensitive to electronic equipment and can't be in the same room as a modem and stuff like that. So, and that kind of thing, the more you focus on it, like you're saying again, Mashfaq, once you focus on it, you can make it stronger. But the problem with that is if you're focusing on everything from cell phone interference to modem signals and all of the other technology and wiring fields and all of that, motors and things around us, that you can become sensitive to that. And if you do and it bothers you, then you become more sensitive to it, more and more sensitive. It bothers you even more. And it can be a bit of a downward spiral there until you have to be in a position where you have to be out in the wilderness with no surroundings that have any electronics and that kind of thing.
But Rick, I think that it is little more interesting now that we know the plasma field. We can actually be sensitive to certain ranges and put up blocking fields or defense shields, so to speak, for other ranges of fields.
That is the magic about being human, exactly, yes. That we're able to tune we have this broad spectrum receiver in our body that receives, like right now, there's literally hundreds of radio signals bouncing around inside of our saltwater body here, which picks up radio signals as well as any AM antenna. You can tell by touching the antenna of a AM radio, it increases the signal because our bodies pick up the signal so well. So we've got all this stuff going on all the time. We're picking up on everything, all the plasma fields and all that. But it's the discernment of how do we, like in a crystal radio circuit is the same way. It picks up all of the fields, but we have to tune it in order to discern a certain radio station from all the other ones. So with our bodies, it's the same thing. We have to discern. Maybe you want to pick up on the biofields of your GANS ball, from the zinc and the CO2 plasma fields, and it interacts with your body plasma fields. So that becomes more of a biofield thing as opposed to the 5G or some cell phone tower interference or modems and that kind of thing, which is a whole other different realm that can interact with our biology, our physicality. But it's not, it's just in a different strength level, and perhaps we're more interested in in other strength levels other than 5G and that kind of thing, other than to block them. Many people are interested in that, and we've used the infinity loops and other methods of blocking excessive harmful fields. So what's some more about that, Mashfaq? What can you tell us about the fields? And
there is a lot more interesting things going on, but I will just briefly touch on this because I'm not sure, because there is some, I have some concern right now because things can be done with this, and I am a little cautious about this from what Mr. Keshe has indicated. But anyway, what I will say is that much like feeling the field, let's say we feel the field at some strength with our hand. Now, with our emotion, we can also send fields to the device because it's operating, because it's free plasma, it's inside, it's operating in a range of fields. And you can, by thinking about it, you can change the field. And it is, I'm saying it's not, at first I thought, well, I'm imagining things, naturally that thought comes to your mind when you do something like that. So I said, okay, let's do it slightly differently. So I had some other people there, and I said, okay, I am going to do this change, and do you detect any change? So several of them said, okay, yes, we can see the change, or we can feel the same change rather. So it's not only my imagination that's playing tricks with me, but actually there is tangible effects. And so,
Right. Mhm.
and actually there's more to this story, but I won't go into that, but let's leave it here. But there is, what do you call it, an exchange. It's not just one way of, like with our hands, we feel it, and it's a sort of like a reception of a signal. Like the palm of the gravitational field at the palm of my hand, it feels like a heat, but at the fingertips get heavy. So these are some of the sensations I can feel. It may be different for different people. And I have noticed there is a left-handed person there as well. And in his case, it was opposite. His right hand was
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
doing
Yeah.
magnetical, and his left hand was doing the gravitational. So it was quite interesting to see that somebody with left-handed was doing differently. That was the only person left-handed, and he was the only person that was doing it opposite of the rest of us. So there are other observations, but I'm just giving you some sample of what we've been doing, and it's very distinct. And and adjusting the strength and all that, that's also there. But now we have to see how we can go to more tangible results, and that I can demonstrate, sort of like video and all that. So experimental design suggestion is welcome, because since this ability is there, can we extend it further to do other experiments? And so anyway, so my thought is that this ability that we have in us to detect can be used by other people in the group to do their experiments. So that's the reason I'm sharing it. And I think it's a very useful thing to have, because instruments are all right, but we don't have instrument. And since we have a good instrument with us, so why bother in a way?
Yes, and as long as we've learned to play it, that works out fine.
But it is true that one of the experiments I was trying to change some of the field, and and so nothing was happening, and I was anxious about the result, as is often the case. So I said, okay, nothing is happening. Okay, I'll go back to my room and do something else and see what happens. So I did something else, got more relaxed, and then said, okay, let's see whether I can change it. I kind of had an arrangement where I can detect precisely what I was going to change. So I decided in my mind, I want to change it by this amount. And so I decided in my room, I didn't see it. And then I said, okay, let's forget about it. And then I went there, and I saw that the change was just that. And interestingly, there was a feedback as well in my head. And I don't know how to describe it beyond that, but definite feedback. And I have noticed that when the feedback is there, I can be certain that the change has happened. And anyway, some more experiment needs to be done in this area, but we'll see how it goes. But there are some very distinct things that are noticeable. So anyway, these are thoughts.
Well, yeah, it occurred to me that if you could do what they call like a double-blind type experiment with that, to with some of your friends that are also sensitive to the fields, to sort of try.
I think everybody can detect it. As far as I can tell, everybody can detect it now.
Right. Well, that'd be a good test to see if everyone, or 9 out of 10 or 2 out of 10, or how does it work out in terms of if they don't know what they're detecting, first of all, or if the fields are turned on or turned off, but you do, or even if, I guess you wouldn't know either, you'd have to do a double blind where where no one knew until the end what the actual results were and so on. So you know as you go along that you're not influencing the results and all of that. That would be interesting, do sort of a clinical trial that way with it, and design the experiment so that it can show some results that way, that there is consistency. Does everyone feel heat in their palm, for example, under certain conditions of trying to sense the fields? Or, you know, what do people feel on their fingertips when this reactor combination is set in a certain position, a certain setting?
I also think that there's another thing which I haven't done actually, but this is one thing I'm thinking about now that we have these flat reactors, because they're very easy to make. I think they're much easier to make than the spherical reactors. But what we can do is we can make two devices very close fields. So if there is a little bit difference, it can manifest in sort of the matter level. Either this comes from the idea of the light experiments from in the last knowledge seeker workshop, either light, heat, or coldness. If there is a complementary device, sort of like close in magnetic field, and I can adjust the field a little bit, and at some point there will definitely, we can come to a point where there will be interaction which can manifest at the metal level, which is light is one and others. But if we can do that, this is one of the thoughts I have, but I'm welcome. I welcome any suggestion, because something very demonstrable has to be done. I mean, changing field is fine and all right, but you know, the experiment that you're suggesting is great, because I think in the end that matters more than having a separate detector, because the controller, we are the controller. So if I can control the field, then it's a altogether different ballgame, really. But we need practice, and this is where I think we have to kind of work a little bit, just adjust on the device for ourselves. But having a complementary device is a good demonstration for people, and this is something I'm thinking about. But this experimental setup, I have to think through the field. Let me interrupt myself for right now because I have to do something, and I'll come back and we talk about where the basics of the field and the rotation, and see how we talked about one directional flow, but as we know in gravitational magnetic we have the two directions. So let's talk about those, because these are very basic things we have to worry about now that we may have control over the fields. So I'll come back in, let's say, half an hour or so.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Mashfaq. All righty.
Hi, Rick. May I add something to this discussion?
Yes, please. Hi, Stefano.
Hi, Rick. Good morning. And I can add something to that Mosfek has said right now, because even I'm doing some testing, and as we can detect with our hands, we have another 4 or 5 senses to use. So, for example, when I enter my garage, when I have my experiment, I try to listen if there is some background noise, or if there is something with my nose, with the odor, with the smell, or to taste if in the mouth there is something. I can detect something inside my taste, with my taste inside my tongue. So I think every one of us maybe has different main sense to use, and it's not bad maybe to use completely our facilities to detect fields, even with sight. Maybe I could enter the room and see, I don't know, if there is a strange light or a shade of color which changes. I don't know. I think in this field a lot of things could happen, and it's very interesting, but even very difficult to detect and how to say, try to find the standard of detecting, because every one of us is different, and every one of us have a main sense which he uses during his daily life, and so every one of us develop a sense more than another. And so it's curious to use to try to use all our senses to detect something. And this is what basically I'm doing. And in regard of the what you were saying before, to detect even the fields from the environment, I think that we can be in two ways of being people. I call the matter state people, the people who are very, how to say, that can be influenced very much from the temperature and pressure of the outside, so the situation, and the GANs type of people. So the person who can balance the condition which he finds outside himself. And because the property of GANs is to stand and balance the environmental pressure and temperature. So even a person can become like the GANs. I don't know if I explained very well the concept.
Well, the GAN supposedly is independent of the temperature and pressure. Is that what you're saying? And that we can learn to become that way?
Yeah, a GANs type of material, which is independent from what happens around him. But instead of being influenced by these things, he tries to balance all the stuff
Right.
around.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all about the balancing in a way. Okay, anybody else have something they'd like to bring up about that? Just trying to see your comments here. Metal Gear suggests heat, magnetism, and cold. And says magnetism feels like wind. Anybody have experience with that they feel, when they feel the fields, it's like a wind, perhaps?
Yep, very much.
Now, mind you, when these things get whipping around, there is an actual wind that you can feel, you know, because of the vortex that's happening, and any spinning apparatus will have that. But that's different than what we're talking about, because you can feel the wind on a stationary a GANS ball perhaps, or in other plasmatic environments. Okay, what else about that? Anybody else have something they want to bring up about that? Or is there another topic we'd like to discuss? Have a look here at some of my notes.
Sorry, Rick, I have a
Yes,
question.
Mm-hmm.
I remember sometimes ago, Mr. Keshe was saying that we have the facilities to, how to say, to analyze some materials if it is produced. Do you know something about it? Because this morning I was playing with my system, and I was playing with a magnet around it, and I could collect something ironish stuff. And so I think to begin to collect this stuff which lands on the table, and eventually send to someone who can analyze it in some way.
That's a good question. I don't know if there's an active lab being used right now, or if there's a university that might be doing some experiments with that. I think there was some testing going on in China, but I don't know if the Keshe Foundation as such has a means to diagnose, or sorry, to analyze that kind of thing. That would be a great service to set up, though, now that you mention it, for someone out there that's got, particularly university experience might help, and having access to university equipment would help as well. If they were a graduate student or somebody that's doing a thesis, for example. Thesis could be a great way to bring the knowledge into the world. Some of the students nowadays that are looking for something different to do for their thesis might want to take on some of the Keshe technology applications and take it right to the limit as to what's really going on to create these extraordinary effects, both in health, agriculture, you name it. There's a long list of testimonials of people that have had spectacular results with the GANSs or with other types of technology. So that is entirely possible. Okay, what else we got for Mark mentions, is the skin part of the brain? I thought Mr. Keshe said that it is. Well, if you use the skin as a sensor, it seems to make sense that it's part of the brain. All right, does anyone have something else they'd like to present here today? I noticed in the news, because ultimately part of this experiment is I can plug in a microphone or other, I was going to use this keyboard here, and there's other sounds that can be input into the system, and the little Tesla coil will play the sounds. It doesn't need a speaker. It can actually play sounds right directly to the atmosphere just from that little plasma wire that sticks out the top here. Nice to do a demonstration of that, actually. Let's see, what can I arrange? But I noticed in the news, there was a cute news thing that some Swiss cheesemakers are experimenting with sound when they make their cheese. They play music when they make the cheese to make the cheese tastier. So this is interesting. They play like Led Zeppelin and hip hop and things like that. And he hopes to show that the power of music can influence the development, characteristics, and even the flavor of the cheese. And they put a small music speaker beside the wheel of cheese, and I don't know how they judge it. I guess they would have to taste it and check humidity and temperature and so on. Yeah, apparently there's a, let me give the article here. It's an interesting idea, actually. It's the article on cheese. It mentions in the article the University of the Arts in Bern is helping this fellow conduct the experiment. And they said, at first we were skeptical, admitted the university's music director, Michael Herrenberg. Then we discovered there is a field called sonochemistry that looks at the influences of sound waves and the effect of sound on solid bodies. And they've experimented with sonochemistry, in particular, looking into how ultrasound can affect chemical reactions. But in this case, they're trying to measure something that might influence the actual cheese. And I think it might be influencing the bacteria, which are important in the cheese making process and so on. So maybe happy bacteria listening to rock music are capable of making better cheese. Who knows? It does kind of make sense in a way. You wouldn't want angry bacteria making your cheese, or unhappy bacteria, if there is such a thing. It seems like if a bacteria gets what they need from the environment, that would make them happy.
And Mr. Keshe said that the chefs can transfer the emotions into the cooking. Remember when he went for the computer-generated food? And he thought it was actually quite good, surprisingly.
Good point. So maybe cheese generated by an automated machine that pumps music into it is going to and produce an improved product. Actually, kind of makes sense. In that case, can Can the sounds input into a device like this influence the fields, which in return influence us, and vice versa? How can we create fields which are perhaps harmonious to our intention? In this case, if I want the intention of lift, I would have to create certain fields which are conducive to that. And perhaps by listening and watching and inputting sound and inputting wave motion into this apparatus is a way of getting feedback as to what is a way to proceed. Just as an example, I've got a gap distance between the little top of the wire here and the bottom of this pan, and that can be adjusted through these screws here to raise and lower this shelf here and make that gap just exactly right. I just experimented before the workshop here a little bit, and I could tell that even the difference of say half a thread, which might be half a millimeter or something, maybe less than that distance, changes the sound that this little device makes. So I'm interested to get it tuned to just the right distance that it will vibrate this in the correct way, and they'll set up a little feedback kind of loop happening, and once it's happy, have to make it happy, make the experiment, make the device happy so that it's functioning the way that it has the potential to. So I don't know, I'm just going to play with it and see where my intuition takes me, because I know that there is some secrets involved in counter-rotating fields. It's been with me since I was a wee lad of just a few years old, and something told me very early in my life that counter-rotating fields were the secret as such to creating and controlling of gravitational situations. I don't know if anybody else has had that sort of intuition or imprint when they were younger, but that's something that's always stuck with me. I've always had a strange curiosity for magnets since I was very young. I remember when the TV repairman came over, I would ask him, "Do you have any magnets you could give me?" Give me, I would say. And once in a while it worked.
Well, when you look at an airplane prop and it starts spinning in one direction, I know it must be an optical illusion, but you can see all of a sudden it looks like it's spinning backwards. Or if you look at the rim of a wheel on a car, it's going forward, but certain rims, they look like they're going backwards for a point.
Yeah, that's usually depending on whether you're watching a movie where in which case the frames per second can synchronize with the number of turns, and you get a certain point where it goes one way and it looks like it's going back the other way, and so on. But it can also happen in real life, especially under fluorescent type bulbs, for example, which are always they have a blinking rate. So when you have rotational machinery, maybe a grinder or something like that, there's certain speeds which it can look like it's not even rotating. We hit this synchronizing speed, and that can be dangerous in certain industrial situations, actually, where people have thought that things aren't rotating, or they thought they're rotating backwards or something like that because of the that essentially it's a strobe effect. You can get the same effect with a strobe. If it's an adjustable strobe, you can actually see what the rotational speed of something is by adjusting the strobe to make it synchronize to the exact speed of the shaft. But there's also certain times when things look like they're going backwards in spite of no fluorescent lights and strobes and other things around. So and yeah, so anyways, what else we got out there? What topics, any topics anyone wants to discuss? Any experiments happening out in the wild? Anything new to report this week?
About the cheese, there is an interesting thing. It has lots of salt, and any gas would be you can transfer fields rather easily because of the salt condition. All the cheese usually have salt of various concentration, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and it's a gas condition, so other fields, much like CO2 box, they will be able to transfer fields, and we can even like think about things, wishing things, and it can be transferred, just like mom's cooking.
Well, it'd be interesting to contact these people that are doing the cheese experiment and give them some examples of maybe some GANS materials or some sort of maybe, let's say, apple GANS water, and will that impart the taste of apple into the cheese if it's held underneath the cheese for a certain period of time while the cheese is setting up and so on. Can we affect the cheese from a distance by focusing as a group, to make better tasting cheese, or to make happy bacteria in the cheese, or to elevate the souls of the cheese.
Then send the cheese to the world leaders.
Yeah, and the cheese is made from milk. Milk is the GANs of the cow. So they're working with the GANs, so it's picking up the emotions if the workers are happy.
Yeah, that seems true. And yeah, I guess, probably, I don't know how they distinguish whether it's the sound that is affecting the cheese, or is it the happier employees it's affecting the cheese. What if they didn't like Led Zeppelin? Would the cheese taste worse? That's another big question. Or if they play classical, would the cheese taste better to some people, but not to others, and that kind of thing?
It would be funny because I could go to the store and order an Eminem cheese. I want an Eminem cheese or an Beatles cheese.
I'll take a country and western cheese, meaning that's the music that's embedded in it. That would be interesting. Would you like your cheese with rock music, country and western, or classical today, sir? Oh, I'll take the classical version. I haven't tried that yet. Interesting. Maybe that's, one of the ways of the future as humans become more sensitive to the fields and we feel the fields more and more. Perhaps our discernment for foods will change, and we'll be sensitive to the finer fields of those foods rather than just the matter level physicality part of it, and we'll request that certain vibes are instilled into it. in a way, that's true of, you could say, of kosher foods, for example. They've had the blessing of the priest or whatever on the event of the food being made, or in some cases, an animal being killed. Other cases, I mean, people do blessings before dinner. That's a traditional thing, to bless the food before eating it, in a way elevating it to another, bringing it up to a different level, to have it have a more beneficial effect, and have people pay more attention to it, and more put more into it, therefore get more out of it. He says maybe that's why cheese gives people nightmares. Maybe the cow's vibes of hurt or fear is in the cheese already. Does cheese give people nightmares? Maybe. It can be constipating. That can be a nightmare for most people. But it's also suggested, not while we're on cheese, that it's good to for cavities. And if you have a tooth you want to repair, that it may be possible by eating a small piece of cheese before you go to sleep. Helps to provide the conditions for the repair of the tooth, apparently.
The same field strength.
Actually, that brings an interesting point, because the zinc oxide is essentially 2 calcium together. So if you take cheese and zinc oxide together, it will amplify the effect. And Mr. Keshe actually once talked about the zinc oxide field and the calcium field's relationship in one of the knowledge seekers workshop, but it can be used actually. I have seen, since, in bone repair, I have used pads using zinc oxide for bone repair cases, and actually it works quite well, especially osteoporosis. We have treated several osteoporosis people with the zinc oxide carbon dioxide combination pads, and it's quite effective.
And how did you do that? Can you say specifically?
And you add up all the weights together, it comes to around 80. 40 is 2 calcium.
Right. But what was your procedure to actually, did you have a certain gradient? You use the zinc oxide GANS water, or did you use the GANS itself?
Zinc itself, the plasmatic weight of zinc is about 80. So that's 2, this is the, what do you call it, doubling effect of plasma. And like when we make carbon dioxide, we get 6, but the carbon is 12. So it's zinc oxide you can similarly use for treating bone or calcium situation where you need calcium. And so this is one technique. And I think I remember distinctly Mr. Keshe talking about this doubling effect. Like silver has the property of doubling of the zinc oxide properties. So silver is a very good, for example. GANS is very effective in curing people as well.
So how would the pad look? Do you, in the case, say someone had shoulder pain, for example, how would you arrange the pad? Would you have a pad on each side of the shoulder?
Yes.
Like front and back. And how would the gradient be? How would you arrange it, or what would be in the pads?
Usually I use 2-to-1 gradient. And so that will be kind of like 2 calcium available, 2 calcium field available in a sense, if you divide it. And the interesting part is that although osteoporosis affects many parts of the body, the effects actually applying to certain section, kind of midsection of the body, it seems to cure this problem quite well. And I have the MRI of the person who was using the pad, so I know that it works. One of the person I haven't found MRI for everybody I dealt with, but
This would be a pad inside of a baggy kind of deal, or a sealed plastic.
I use just simple plastic pad. We have a cloth covering because of the hot weather. People don't like the plastic feeling, so that's
Oh yeah.
Distribute the pad in this, humid condition. But other than that, it works quite well. Pain situation is easy to tackle, but osteoporosis specifically, I have done several.
Okay, thank you.
But the interesting part, what I wanted to point out, not so much osteoporosis, but this dividing of the field and multiplication as well. It happens as well.
Andrew's asking in the chat, can you explain the new way to connect the maggrav coils, please? Does anybody have information on that?
I can mention a little bit about how I connected, which is different from maggrav connection, like the reactor I showed, which has the gravitationals are connected. The inner coils are connected in series, and the outer coils are connected in series. And so one is creating counterclockwise rotation, another is creating clockwise rotation. So you are essentially affecting gravitational and magnetical in a different way. But last workshop, Mr. Keshe mentioned that the outer coil is gravitational, not the inner coil. Remember that, Rick?
That got switched around, yeah.
Yes. So
I think that's what he's talking about here, probably.
Yeah. Does that mean, but I think this may be like, it's something like this clockwise and counterclockwise. We can use the coils in clockwise or counterclockwise using the right-hand rule, if you think about it. If you do clockwise, you're tightening the screw, right-hand rule. And so you can, instead of feeding from the side we are used to feeding, we can do it from the opposite side. Then the rotation is opposite. Does it make sense? Not. I think this is a good topic to kind of talk about if anybody has any idea, but I think it's very similar. But one can use it either way, depending on how one energizes the plasma or creates the plasma flow, let's say with the plasmatic battery.
Yeah, the way I usually work things.
Draw a diagram about what I'm saying?
Sure, that might be useful.
Okay, let me log in from my computer.
All right, great, thanks. What I was going to suggest is that my usual experience is that if something doesn't work one way, just reverse the connections and try it. And that was my big breakthrough, as I was talking earlier about the interaction of the two opposing magnetic fields, that they can lock together. I discovered that inadvertently by just trying to do things backwards, because I had my well, it doesn't matter. I had the original magnetic coupling set up with north to south, so that it would have a direct connection with the magnets. The north here would attract the south on the other side, and so on. They would all be in a direct connection. That seemed to make sense. But when I did that with an actual rotating device, it bound up the system. There's too much drag with this pulling factor. It needed bearings to keep them apart so they didn't stick together, and all this became complicated, strangely enough. So I couldn't get the turbine to rotate because of all the binding of this system that was stuck in attractive mode. So I said, oh, what the heck? I'm just going to flip the magnets over. I just flip the disc over and try it and see what happens. And I tried it, and it went kind of click. The two discs, the fields, you could feel the fields mesh together, kind of like that. And it was a whole different ball game then. And when I fired up the air compressor, I got the turbine spinning with this. Well, I had a saw blade on top. That was a little hairy because it did engage and everything worked perfectly. It started whipping around at many thousands of RPM, and I didn't expect that to work so well. And I kind of freaked out because now I had this saw blade sitting magnetically driven, sitting on top of this turbine case with no bearings attached to it, nothing to keep it from flying off other than these engaged repulsive magnetic fields. And that was a big revelation to me. And luckily I lived through it and kept my arms and legs and everything. And I had to go and run and shut down the air compressor because it fired up, and it wasn't going to let go of this thing. It was going faster and faster and faster. And it actually melted part of the plastic cover from spinning so fast on top of it. But I learned that from that experience, a number of things. Number one is to try things differently. Try it inverted, try it backwards, try it the exact opposite of the way that you think it's going to do it, and observe it. And does it work better? Does it work worse? Is it a crazy idea, or can you learn something from it? So some of the crazier things I've done, I've definitely learned things through. And you know, I would just go, well, okay, I've got a turbine that I've put air pressure in. I've got that to spin with CD discs. I've had a turbine I put water pressure in to have that spin. Can I put water and air in at the same time? What would happen then? So I tried that. And sure enough, this turbine could take air and water at the same time, and had very special things that happened, and the way the water interacted, I got to experience all that. But sometimes you have to have kind of what might appear on the surface to be a crazy idea. That's actually how I got a reputation back then as crazy Mr. Fix-It Rick, because of this rotating saw blade on top of the turbine that I made as a YouTube video. But it worked. It gave me a reputation as such of somebody that was willing to take chances and do kind of fun, crazy things. And that became sort of the mood of some of my videos, and some of them went viral and people enjoyed them. Some of them were controversial as well. But that's all part of the scene when you get into the viral video thing. Okay, how are you doing there, Moshfaq? You
Yeah,
ready?
I'm ready.
All right, you've got a...
I'm sharing my whiteboard.
Oh, you are? Okay, sorry, I couldn't see it there behind my other...
No, I'm just starting now.
Okay, good.
Okay. So the way my current arrangement is this 90-degree angle coils. So I'll draw two coils. Let's see. So there's the inner coil. Let's see. Let me complete the drawing. So I have it right now this way, and so the connection is so that it's anti-clockwise in the gravitational, and then this one connect. Okay, let's see. This one connects to this guy here. So this one goes anti-clockwise, and this one goes anti-clockwise, but from this angle, if I look at it this angle. And similarly, this is how this one is connected to a plasma battery. So I just draw a plasma battery. Similarly, there is another plasma battery which is connected to this one, which is going the opposite direction, the outer coil. And this one is connected to let's see, going that way. So this one is connected to this guy here. So I'm not sure my drawing is very clear, but I can do it in a slightly different. Let me do it with one coil and then go to a double coil configuration. That will be easier probably. I don't think this is very clear. No. Oh, that's the wrong thing. So the plasma battery is connected to this one, and therefore the flow is this way. The other plasma battery is connected to this one, and therefore the flow is this way. So this is this double coil, like McGrath coil we have. This is how I'm creating the rotation in the field plasma. And then you think of the other coil connected in series with this one, but the flows are reversed in the two coils. Now, this looks like the inner one is counterclockwise. Now, if I flip it, the other one becomes counterclockwise, the same situation. So I don't know the outer and the inner thing. Rick, what do you think? It depends on how I look at it, actually, whether it's clockwise or anti-clockwise. But there is a better way of looking at it, which is if we look at this coil from this angle, like horizontally. So, we're kind of looking at it like this way, flat from the side. So the counterclockwise rotation is the inflow. So you can think of this as like, if the flow is inwards, then the rotation is this way. And if you look at it from the top, it's an outward flow. And then if you look at it from the top, it looks clockwise. If you look at it from this end here, if you look at it from here, then it's clockwise. But if you look at it from here, then it's counterclockwise. Am I making sense at all?
I refuse to get into arguments about, or sorry, discussions about clockwise and counterclockwise.
But But the thing is that if you use the outer coil as the gravitational, you just use it for the inflow and the outflow for the inside. So that's how I see it. So I don't have a problem. It's just how you want to use the coil. I don't know whether I make any sense or but anybody can ask me a question. I'll try to clarify this as much as possible. But I think it might be better to go and look at the field flow in using our right-hand rule, and then I think it might be a little more clear. And this is what I wanted to talk about, really. So let me clear this up, see whether we can make any sense out of this. So look at the current flow through the wire. So if we think about current flow in a wire, actually there are two flows. Although in electricity we don't consider the other flow, the gravitational part of the flow. So there is the other directional flow. So how do we look at this magnetic field flux and the conventional electrical flow as a field flow? It is actually a field flow because we know that current flows because of the skin effect. It doesn't flow through the wire, but it flows through the boundary of the wire. That's why we have these stranded wires to create huge surface areas, so that more current can be carried using the same size wire. So in our electrical systems, what we have is we have a positive side and a negative side. So the current is usually, by convention, it's going from positive to negative. And that's how we consider the current, direction of the current. In plasma, our flow is from negative to positive. And so in our electricity, as Mr. Keshe mentions, we are looking at the magnetical part of it. But the gravitational part of it is from negative, the opposite flow, the negative to the positive. So the gravitational is going opposite as well as inwards, in towards the inner part of the wire. So if we look at the wire this way, let's say this is the circumference of the wire. Using the convention in the other diagram, the gravitational is going this way, and the magnetical is peeling out this way. So let me draw it slightly differently with another kind of. So the gravitational flow is going towards the inside of the wire, and magnetical is peeling out of the wire. So if you think about peeling out, that means it is going this way. And this is, you can think of the finger that holds, and this is the magnetic field that's being generated as the current flows, which is from the combination from the magnetical flow, which is peeling out, whereas the inward flow, which is the gravitational, which is going inside the wire. So this is our magnetic field flux that's being generated by the magnetical component. And once this field flux gets generated, it also creates, so it creates this donut. Let me draw the donut here, the favorite donut. So you have the wire, and then you have the donut of the magnetic field being created around the wire. But because of the donut, which is again a circular motion, we have also the magnetic, the gravitational flow inside this. So it will be kind of like this. Using the right-hand rule, this will be the incoming, this will be the outgoing. So if I have the wire, which way would it be? Okay, there are too many back and forth arrows, but there will be a magnetic gravitational flow across this donut. And then there is the swirling motion of the magnetical outside, which is the donut, which is creating the magnetic field. So we can explain our electrical systems using this way, which is exactly the same thing we have in our nano-coated wire. And as these fields starts interacting, these donuts, this is what I drew last time. The more turns of the coil interact, the donuts, the potential goes higher up, and you have a potential difference between the two ends of the coil, and which creates the rotation in the field. I don't know whether anybody has saw my last one. To me, it's fairly simple when I get down to the very specific details of it. But it's not as simple in the sense that we are used to this electrical term of only one direction working, not only the magnetical side, not the gravitational side. If you include the gravitational side, actually things become much easier to understand, because I had lots of problem when I was studying this stuff. But now it's a lot clearer, actually, because then you can explain the donut that's being created using the magnetical and the gravitational component. Anyway, so and that's why, electricity gets generated as magnets move. You can see the opposite effect. Instead of electrical current moving through the wire, you can move a magnet. Think of the blue line as a moving magnet. It's the same effect, just the complementary effect. But the effect is the same. There is no difference between that and this. So anyway, I don't know how far I made it clear, but I hope, because it's a little bit difficult, partly because we are used to the other terminology. Anybody can ask me any question, but I'm not sure how well I explain. The right-hand rule, if you think about it, then these blue circles I drew in the middle figure, that's the cross section of the finger wrapping around the wire. And the fingers are the donuts of magnetic field, or magnetical component of the electrical field flow. Any question, or for clarity's sake, at least? It's very basic and it has some detail, but it's very basic, really.
Okay, any questions from anybody of our panelists here?
I can explain it other ways, but I tried to do it with electricity because this is something familiar. I just added the gravitational component to the electrical field, which is exactly the same thing that we have even in the magnetic, in our plasmatic flow. Electricity is just a matter level plasmatic flow and nothing else. Yeah, my professor would kill me, but that's another story. Take away my degree. I really don't need my degree. I think there goes my degree. They took my degree away by now.
Well, yeah, I never
that thing. I don't need it anymore.
I never got my degree because one of the first things was arguing with the professor of, I asked him, well, what is an electron? After he went through 2 boards of formulas describing what an electron is, supposedly by electrical theory and so on. I asked him, well, that's okay, we've described an electron in terms of these formulas, but what is an electron? What is it made of? What is it? And he couldn't explain. He could not answer me because he didn't know, and they still don't really know. They still describe it in lots of fancy words and experiments, but do we really know what the electron even is?
You are fortunate because once you get that degree, you develop a gravitational field or attachment to it, and it's very hard to detach from the degree.
Well, exactly, and that's where I saw myself going, because after 2 years of engineering, I could see that I was in a General Motors engineering university, and that's where they were trying to jam me in to make me fit their mold. And I wasn't part of that mold. It wasn't working. So we mutually decided to part our ways after 2 years of the 4-year program. But I'm glad in many ways that I did escape that, because it was like a black hole of indoctrination, essentially, is what it was. And once you're in, then you got to pretty much stay with it, because if you were to argue the basic precepts, you would drive yourself crazy. You wouldn't be able to get any work done, because you would be questioning your own basic reasoning of why things act the way they do and all that kind of thing. And that's one of the problems and issues with this plasma technology, is getting a handle on what makes it different, what makes it so hard to explain in many ways, because of this invisibility factor and hard to measurability factor, you might say. We were talking earlier about measuring with our hands, measuring with the responses of our body, with the fields and so on. And then if that's true, why can't we just make a detector that works every time for detecting these fields that we're feeling? And it's a bit of a, maybe we will one day. Maybe we already have in some way, in some science lab somewhere, and they don't even know what they have. Maybe they already have the detector that's whatever part of us that's able to detect. But
but
it's
actually the light that Mr. Keshe showed, actually, that's kind of like the beginning of the detector in a way. Think of it like, it's an interaction between 2 cosmos. And the difference is such that it manifests in the electromagnetic spectrum, where that white or whatever color light it was. And now if you slightly move the field away, you will get different color of the spectrum as you slide across the field. But it only will measure only the visual range that we can detect with our eyes. But since we are sensitive to other fields as well, why not use a instrument that you can dynamically adjust, which is us? We are trying to essentially bring the field detection within the perceptible range, which is either heat, light, or some sort of mechanical motion, as is the case of motor, displays. But if we have the faith, let's call it that, that we can adjust ourselves to do the detection, then maybe we don't need it. And we can operate at 0 time speed as well. So there is a perhaps our dependence on the external measuring device may be something that we have to, let's say, create a detachment to.
Well, possibly. It may be that only those who are able to see it are the ones that are able to see it. And it's sort of what you see is what you get kind of deal. And if you're able to see and feel the fields, then you become one of the ones that receive the benefits of that or can interact with that and cause other changes and so on. And if you can't see them or feel them, then you're not in that realm. Therefore, you can't interact with them on that level. And maybe they would not affect you on that level as well then. So, but that would be less of an objective. It'd be hard to make experiments with that because we'd have to, it would be subjective in a way, or only a certain group of people that were able to feel the fields would be able to interact and do the experiment and so on, which might be the way, maybe that's the way the new science goes. In the old science, it was always had to be replicable. The idea is that you give the science specificate the experiment specifications, and anybody on the planet anywhere with the lab with the right gear should be able to duplicate the experiment, right? And have the same results. But with our feeling of the fields, some people might feel their palms get hot, and somebody else might feel the wind between their hands, and somebody else might have their nose gets itchy or something, and that's how they know the fields are there. It's somewhat variable, but of course there's also some commonality. If you're to look at, I don't know, all shamans and all priests or whatever, if there's 1,000 of them, then a certain percent will have certain techniques they use to feel the fields or to influence fields or what might be called entities and so on. So how do we make that can it be made into science is one question. Science in terms of duplicable experiments for anyone who wishes to engage in it.
Hi, Rick.
Jalal, go ahead. Maybe good to hear from you there.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. For the winding teaching, Mr. Cash taught that in earlier September 2015, and it is very beautiful teaching.
Sorry, did you say 116 or 16?
No, 2015, earlier September.
Yeah,
the first 3 sessions.
In the private teachings.
Yeah, in the private teaching, yes. And that is the beauty of the private teaching. You will explore whole things about the winding, magnetical to gravitational and gravitational to magnetical, and what is the benefit from going magnetical as a gravitational and gravitational as a magnetical. It's very beautiful teaching there. So anyone, if you want to listen to that and benefit from it, it will be very beautiful, and you will experience everything there, and then you will see, because you cannot feel without experience, as you said. You need to experience that. You need to work with it, and then you can feel it, and then you can see it. Thank you.
One of the things about the quantum mechanics, if you consider quantum mechanics, where our fields are in constant interaction with fields of various things, devices, matter level, or other plasmatic levels, then you have this quantum phenomena at the macroscopic level. And the Earth's gravitational field is different, magnetical field is different in different locations. So you cannot say that it's reproducible if it's done in, say, some one country versus another country, because the field is different between the two places. So so many things we have, and that's why one of the problems with the trouble that quantum mechanics causes in the traditional physics is this: you throw the reproducibility out of the window. And that's why an open system has trouble with things like concept like entropy. And at one point, I used to do research in some theoretical research in chaos theory. It's absolutely, you don't know nothing about any of these things. So we have lots of approximation and boxed in that we have to have instrument, and we have to have the classical reproducible results. But if you consider the field interaction, if you move the GANs production from one room to the next, you can see the difference. Or in the same room, close to the wall, there is a difference.
Or day or night.
Yes, exactly.
I'd like to show an image that was sent to me by Pia.
Let me stop my share.
And you can go back to it after this because it's a nice image, but to watch. But yeah, let me bring this up. This is hand done by Pia, and it's her Pia's Magrev field. It's called. I thought it's interesting, especially in relation to the diagrams that Moshfegh was just making with his apparatus and the way the fields go in that. And she seems to be showing the similar fields around the body. And we're talking about sensing with the hands and so on. You can see how there's some kind of crossing with that, with the hands or with the fields of that level of the body compared to that sort of aura around the whole body going the other way. So I wonder if there's something there about sort of a crossing of the fields that occurs between the aura of the body and then the fields around the hands in particular, or the arms, or maybe the center of the body from the solar plexus. Maybe that's where she's indicating here, the solar plexus, perhaps at the kind of the center of the sun solar of her body.
This is actually very interesting because I have to try the field testing without my shirt on, because actually there might be something to sense with our body which we never really try.
Well, one thing that is very important is the idea. I was thinking of this quite a bit in the last few days, of the solar plexus, what we call the solar plexus, more or less around where the belly button area is, and or maybe a bit higher, under the rib cage and so on. And why is it called the solar plexus? And why is it, solar is known as center, our solar system. Sun is our sun is the center of our solar system. the solar plexus is the center of the sun in our body, and there's times when I know in my own life that that area has been, I call it opened up. You can feel it open, and it becomes like a major sensing apparatus. It becomes your way of interacting in a way, rather than using the brain or the eyes. You can use the sensing of your solar system as a interaction, as an emotion detector. You can be sensitive to things through that centrum. So I'm wondering if that's a different system than the body system, let's say, the aura around the body, which we can feel around the body. If someone comes close to you within a certain distance, you can feel them from, from behind or the side or whatever. And you can learn to expand those fields around the body and so on. But the solar plexus seems to be a different area. It's got its own field about it, its own ability to reach out and connect, and it seems very much a connecting, I could call it a chakra, I guess, but to me, it's just, I call it a centrum. It's like the intuitive seems to be centered there, I'd say. Anybody else have any experience with that or any comments about that?
No, I wanted to comment what MOSFAC said, that Mr. Keshe had indicated that when you're wearing clothes of polyester and rayon and these other materials that are oil-based, it interferes with the fields.
Definitely, I find that. And I mean,
and there is another thing. I mean, in some of the mystical schools, actually, they talk about, you can't actually feel it. Talk about that we have sensing capacity in all directions. We have eyes in all directions. And, sometimes you can tell that people are coming from behind you without even looking. So obviously, we do have some capacity of detecting fields of somebody coming from behind, so this kind of sensation is not uncommon. I think all of us have experienced it. And so the field detection capability might be much stronger than we imagine. Perhaps what is being told to us in our educational, social, or religious system is that we can't.
We're being told what? Moshfek, just at the critical moment there, you cut out, I believe.
We're being told in our religion systems, and then he got cut out.
Yes. You still there, Moshfek? Oh, he's having to reconnect
I got
or something.
disconnected from a little bit.
You mentioned religion and everything went dead.
Okay, those guys are at it.
We were not supposed to talk politics or religion here.
No, what I was saying is very simple. So they don't need not to worry about it. Is that in our social, religious, and educational system, we've been told that we can't have this kind of detection, or we don't have this ability. But if we believe that, or have the faith that we have this ability, that's half the battle. Then we need to practice and do all of the other routines. But as long as we have the faith that we can do it, then we will probably do it, all of us, I'm sure.
Well, that's right. It's a matter of being reminded, I think, like actually literally reminded in a way, of our latent human potential for these kinds of extra senses. And it's not something that's talked about very much because I think those that have those senses have them, and others that don't or haven't developed them yet wouldn't believe or know or understand what those other people were experiencing or going through by having extra senses. So most people might say, well, what good does it do you? You know, I already do my job okay, and I come home and I interact with my family fine, and everything's good in my life. Why would I need extra senses? I'm having a hard enough time dealing with the 3 or 4 that I have. Or is it 5 or 6? For most people, it's probably closer to 3 or 4. Once the sense of smell gets knocked out by the air pollution, the sense of taste gets knocked out by the heavy use of sugar and salt, and our other senses get overwhelmed and knocked out in various ways as well. So we become sort of numb to a lot of our ordinary senses, and probably even number to our extraordinary senses. Some people might go away to the wilderness on a retreat or some sort of place where they're away from the ordinary distractions that they've been in, especially in a city where there's so much action, so much going on, so many different fields interacting, and get away to a desert or ocean situation, and the distractions become less, and then you can go inside more easily rather than being externally distracted. You can go inside yourself and connect with that part of yourself that is able to have the extra sensory perceptions, and then you can reconnect with the environment with that extra oomph of the of having that connection to our deeper self, and starting to use those particular aspects that may have been latent or hidden or just not used before. But it seems we have to be reminded, or remind ourselves in some way. Maybe we read something out of a book, or maybe we just read a sign on the highway or something. It just reminds us, oh, geez, I forgot to really look inside myself for these answers, and to activate my sensing, and to activate my, feeling apparatus and so on. Whoops, I've forgotten about that in the last few days, weeks, months, or years, depending, maybe the last few lifetimes. And sort of we wake up to that, and that changes, it gives us the opportunity then to look at ourselves more like this picture that we see in front of us. Do we see ourselves normally as the entity, the physicality entity in the center here? That's what we see, that wears clothes and combs its hair and has everything tickety-boo. That's just the skin of that particular layer. If we're able to see the fields, we might see a different picture. Or maybe it would look similar, but maybe look like it's lit up from the inside, or something different perceptually with what we're looking at.
It does look rather Da Vinci-esque, doesn't it? The picture she drew.
Well, Da Vinci did have a technique of drawing much like this, actually, where he used multiple lines in order to make the image of a back or some limb or whatever. Very much like what she's done here. Yeah.
And then when you go up into the mountains, Mr. Keshe said, you lose one of the fields, and that's why you feel so much freer and so more open, because I think there's not such a gravitational effect on you.
Well, it's interesting the way she's drawn the fields underneath the feet, as if she's being lifted up and up in the air somehow, or definitely not. I don't see this one as grounded to the earth necessarily. This isn't the earth grounding procedure. This is the let's go to space procedure, it seems like.
Our awareness of the field detection is actually very easy to test. Like all of us have it. When you drive, especially if you look at another person, even from an angle or even from behind, person who is driving in another car, in most cases, they'll look at you. If you look at the person kind of like intently, they will sense it and look at you. I have tested it, and actually it's quite interesting that most people, especially those who drive, not the passengers, but the person who is driving, because the person is using a lot more senses in driving, situational awareness is much higher. So they tend to actually look at you once you look at them intently. And this is, anybody can do this test, and actually it's quite interesting, the result.
Well, I think that's part of the game that most young people play as well, where it's trying to get the attention of someone else, or trying to interact, by subtle means of getting attention and so on. It's an art and science, this whole thing of our attention and our perception and how to use that. And quite often it's essentially used against us in terms of that's the whole purpose of advertising, is to find a way to get us to buy things, and before we know it, we're buying a certain box of cereal because that's the ad we've seen thousands of times as a kid, and we've convinced our mothers that we must have that particular brand of cereal because our attention has been diverted into that. And with repetition, then you can actually get people more or less hypnotized in order to get them to do things. But those who know about attention and how to control that, for example, a good a good magician or a hypnotist or a shaman or a priest, knows how to gather attention from others to direct it into a certain area or a certain topic, and how to manipulate that attention essentially. And if you look at our attention, like it's sort of the interface of our plasma, you might say. So, and we can do things with our attention. It's something that we can project. We can place our attention on an object. You can look at your computer where you're sitting now, and you could look at the objects around, and you could focus your attention on one of those objects. You can place your attention on it. You can actually leave your attention on one of those objects and keep it there for, well, any period of time if you wish. And sometimes we involuntarily have our attention caught up with objects and so on. And that's a big issue in my place here. I've got objects all over the table, all over the room, and it's, if I cast my eyes around, then it's, my eyes are being caught, my attention, rather, not my eyes, my attention is being caught by different objects, different things. What should I do with this? What should I do with that? Oh, I should put that away. Oh, this is here, maybe I should be working with it. And all these different scenarios are playing out in the background of the brain, and you have a multitude of stimulation in front of you that you need to make decisions about or need to interact with and so on. So our attention gets caught up in those things, And we can learn to regain that attention. We can draw it back, to keep our attention, to use it to focus on our own internal processes, the act of feeling the fields, for example. It takes, like you were mentioning, Moshfak, it takes your full attention, right? You need it. You need to get away from the other, whatever office things that are going on, or different factors in your emotions and all that sort of stuff, and get clean and clear for that moment. Be present with those fields in order to feel them. And the same with our internal fields going on in our physicality. And we need to stop and take assessment by observation. Objective observation would be the preferable way to look at that, literally. So something to think about. It's a big part of the whole program, the whole process, the experimental methods that we use. We talk about our intention quite a bit, but also the attention on whether it's on objects or on emotions or on thoughts or on feelings or on, there's many different realms that we can place our attention, which is, I think, the greatest tool that we have as a human is our attention, because then we can decide to, let's amplify the fields of the fingertips. Okay, I'm amplifying the fields of my fingertips now, and I can feel my fingertips kind of warming up, and I can feel, I can use them as sensors here in the room and kind of turn around with my hands. And instead of looking with my eyes, I'm now trying to focus more with my hands. What do my hands take in as the impression of the fields, rather than the eyes, which normally I rely so much on the eyes, and most people do. I think we naturally assume that what we see in front of us is what the thing is. So we look at the external. Essentially what we're seeing is the rubbing of the fields. The rubbing of two or more fields produces the light and the matter. And that's what we see, and we think that's the whole thing itself, but it's actually only the interaction, the friction between the fields. It's the leftover stuff from the fields. It's not the fields themselves. So in effect, the things we see is the leftover image of the thing itself. And we seldom get to see the thing itself, because you would have to be totally sensitive to the fields, be totally present in the moment, because it's always changing dynamically and so on. So it's a bit of a tricky situation there. I think it also gets back into the last workshop we did with the One Nation, One Planet, One Race for World Peace, and we got into the commandments. One of the last commandments regarding the, let me see, maybe I can bring it up here, but just a second here. Well, it's too hard for me to bring it up right now. It's just to do with detachment is the word that was used in the actual thou. How's it go?
Thou shalt not possess.
No, it was the one after that. I'm gonna have to look it up properly here. Hang on a sec. Just put Keshe commandments into Google. It comes up with the full thingy, and it's simply Yeah, it's just called detachment, actually. So thou shalt not possess was the 21st commandment, and detachment was the 22nd. And so the idea there is the idea I took away, or one of the ideas, is the idea of detaching. Mr. Keshe actually came in and talked quite a bit about detachment as well, and being able to let go of the various things that one gets attached to, and that detachment is a freedom. There's a freedom involved there. So it looks like in the diagram, in the picture of Pia here, there seems like a definite detachment. It looks like something that's sort of floating, self-contained. Somehow this cross also between the vertical and horizontal fields, it seems like. In fact, you can almost see the cross image in this diagram. Maybe that's what the cross actually means in the true teaching of the cross. It's the interaction of the fields, the crossing of the fields. And that's what produces at least the illusion of the matter that we see. And that's what I'm trying to get at with this pie pan and the crossing of the fields as well, the way I look at it. Or we can look at the way the sun interacts with the earth. That's also the crossing of the fields. There's the interaction of rays as well, but there's fields involved. Okay, any comments? I've been yakking enough here. Did you want to go back to your drawing there, Mashfek, or?
I have another thing. As you were talking, I was looking at my deuterium GaNs containers. And one of the things that's fascinating is that there are two deuterium containers side by side. And you have the plane of the liquid should be flat, but they're both tilted towards each other. So where the two are facing each other, it's a little higher. So they're interacting. I can see the two GaNs are interacting because it's not level. It's kind of like tilted, both the bottles.
Yes, we've seen that before with Ganses, and Mr. Keshe has mentioned that recently to keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, it's very obvious. And also and I'm also making another container, making the GaNs in another container, and next to it there's nothing but the plate from which the negative nano-coated plate towards the non-nano-coated side, there is a tilt as well.
Did you want to show that? Do you want to?
I don't know whether it's very minute, and you have to see it at a certain angle, and the lighting here is
okay. Yeah.
terrible. I don't think it will come through. To me, it's obvious, but I don't think you can see it. I don't think it's possible here, right?
Okay.
But this is something very noticeable. So now we have to make two magnets that kind of interact in a visible way, just like regular magnets. Anyway, that's some of the thoughts I have, and I'm working towards that direction. Hopefully we'll have something.
All right. Well, Lawrence, you've got your hand up here. Let's go ahead and what do you got to say today?
Hello, good morning, good evening. I've been thinking about the box and what we saw last week with the layers flashing and how to achieve a similar result. And as usual, I don't have anything to show, just talk. But I wanted to first go back to the usual nano coating box. Up until now, we've been focused on the nano coated copper, but we also got the chicken wire in there, and we also got the air in there. And I think when we do the nano coating, not only do the metal part of the copper turn into nano state, but I think also the chicken wire mesh surface turns into nano, and some of the air that's in the box turns into nano as well, which means when we align the fields of the nano-coated copper with the electrodes, the probes, we also align the fields of the gases. Do you get what I mean? And within the layers of the gases which are aligned, we have a similar superconductive plasma structure as we have within the layers of the nano-coated copper. And when we go to the box example that we saw, the Eindhoven box, where the different umbrellas are connecting into the empty box of the universe at different heights within the layers of the box. The layers are the plasmatic layers, which automatically are generated by the different strength of the fields within the gases. These are those nano-coated, or these are those superconductive layers which result from the nano-coated gases in the box. And the reason why there is a voltage that we can measure when we touch the umbrellas, two different umbrellas, is because when we consider the nano coating, we should have a super resistive layer on top. And the air in between should not conduct any electricity. If we consider the matter level electricity circuit, the air gap is always a resistive thing. So even in that box, the connection between the umbrellas should be created by something, and that connection must be the plasmatic layer in between the gases, which reacts to what we create as a circuit through touching the umbrellas. And if we consider two of these umbrellas, not side by side, but one on the top side of, say, this sphere and one on the bottom side of the sphere, then we are inducing a prismatic gradient, because go back to the fireplace videos from 2009, the very, very first one from Mr. Keshe, and he explains even the electron is a form of plasma which has the same content as the proton, but in a smaller scale. And since the stronger feeds the weaker, when we create this electric induced magnetic field, we are creating a weak magnetic field, which is fed by the stronger plasmatic magnetic within the layers of the gases in the box. And since we have a gradient on the top of the box compared to the bottom of the box, because depending on how we loaded the nano-coating box, we have different strengths of fields, there will be in the plasmatic gap in between the top of the and the bottom of the top electrode and the bottom electrode, there will be a free plasma generated.
Okay, thank you for the ideas there.
And just to finish this line of thought, I think this plasmatic field between the gases, within the gases, is the source of the process, what we call nano-coating. So if there were no plasma in between the gases, the process would be much slower. We have oxidization, as we call it, or we experience it even in the metal level in a non-nano-coating box, but the process is much slower. Thank you for listening.
Okay, anybody want to comment on Lawrence's ideas there? Or or any other ideas at this point? Got 2 people in the attendees. I'll bring you in. I think we're going to wrap things up here soon, but we'll see. Okay, there we go. Does anyone have any topics they would like to bring up, or any other comments or other images we can look at, or anything else that comes to mind at this point in time? Pretty quiet out there. All right, well, maybe we should wrap it up for today. It's been quite a few hours here.
Morning.
Oh, hi, Jedi.
Hello. So, okay, let's add something. If we want to use our body to feel, to sense, then we should try to develop our perceptions. Normally, we speak about 5 senses, and then there is the 6th sense, which is something metaphysical most of the time. But we really own 50 senses. And these are the physical ones. And then there are a quantity of metaphysical ones, which are not taught and not spoken about, of course, and that they are carried out by people that work in the spiritual field, let's say. Some of them, in, of course, we know about them, but from the material point of view, we cannot experience them. So if we want to understand nature, phenomena, what's happening, what's going on, then we need to concentrate our attention. So it is concentration, attention, on this kind of senses. So you choose your instrument or various instruments, and altogether you sense it. You sense this, what is happening, the field. So, I mean, if we don't know that we have this faculty, so we only speak about 5, but we have 50, then we miss a great part of it. And so we don't understand reality. We just leave it unconsciously. Consciousness is what relates us to the higher level. So once we are conscious, we understand we have these 50 and another 50, maybe 108 altogether. That is the physical manifestation of understanding reality, let's say, which has a subtle way and a physical way. So it's it could be any kind of perception we feel. We just have to note down and count them, and find out how many we have, we know, we are able to use. This is sensing with our body. And that is, of course, personal. So it is specific to a subjective vision. If we want to see things from a different angle, then we have to use instruments. And every device has its own range and specific understanding, because it was created to receive that length. So there again, you could add 2 or 3 different instruments, build a new one, which has 3 perceptions at the same time. That's why we are sending the orbit satellites, which are carry on something like 200 projects, because they are sensing in 200 different ways reality. So this is by the integration of what is the device, so it's the external perception with the internal perception, of course, you can understand. But in all this, even if you have developed a very, let's say, artificial intelligence, a very good system, this will not work by itself because it is not intuitive. And that is the difference there is. It's not biological from a point of view, let's say. There is no spiritual sparkle, let's say. I don't know how to express this concept. It is alive, of course. It has fluxes of energy, it has a shape, it has a form, it has a memory. It is alive in some way. So it is a creation. We created it. So it is a living entity of some kind, but it is not able to act as a human or an animal or virus, bacteria. We're not there yet. We have not this kind of consciousness to produce, to create, to reach generation. We can reach creation from another point of view, which is by adding simple parts. That is Leonardo da Vinci said this. We can play with simple parts and put them together. And so we are working with the complexity, but we cannot produce the most simple part itself. We have to work with these kind of atoms. So you understood things from this point of view. Now, there are, of course, dampening fields, which are the impossibility to reach a level of conscience because of cultural dampening, which is nonsensical production of infinite variables that do not contain the idea. There is no idea in the movie. There is no idea. So it's just going like this, passing, and we forget it. The day after, we don't speak about it anymore. It's gone. So that is a dampening field. But if you add 1 or 2 or 3 ideas or good ideas, then they will make a sequel, or so it will go on for many years, and so they produce first, second, third, fourth, etc., etc. So that is there is a fact that a dampening field is there, and so this doesn't allow conscience, it doesn't allow senses to grow, and so it's stopping our understanding. In so many ways, we are using, in fact, the same principle of the planetary principle. So the circulation of rhythmic circulation of functions that is contained within a loop. And this is never ending. So it's like a roundabout. The moment we reach this understanding, then we raise our conscience to another level. That is abstention. Then we lose weight. But we must reach this kind of ability. It is it's called siddhi in India. So there is a word for it. And these may be, in the Western world, we call them powers of some kind, magical powers or whatever. So it is a job that you have to carry on within the alchemy of our soul. That is the internal job, let's say, which is not physical. Then there is an alchemy of the external world, which is a physical alchemy, but it is a reflection of what is happening within. So once you place yourself in the middle of this architecture, this building, let's say, then you can see either ways and you can understand what is going on. You have to sit there, meditate, and to see what's happening, to feel it, to see if, in a physical way what's going to happen next, or just to guess what's going to happen next, just to guess. And then you find out that you have two answers at the same time. A physical answer, so that is cause-effect, and you have a metaphysical answer, which is following karma as well, but is still there. So you have a double perception, and this enables equilibrium. Because if you never work on the spiritual side, on the subtle part of your body, your thoughts, what's happening within yourself, then you are going to follow the material expression of the manifestation. They have created a mold, and so that is the shape they are going to give to you, and you are accepting this. So that is a gift. But as a Trojan horse, it is a gift, but there is something within it that is not really working very well. So it is a gift that is stopping you from reaching. That is the consequence. So once you have a device without intuition, it means nothing at all. Even if you have the technology without the understanding, it is nonsense. Don't switch it on. Don't touch it. You need your level of conscience just to reach the exact knowledge required to use, and not to abuse, to use. That is understanding. That is the practice of, let's say, the alchemy, which is within and outside, of course, at the same time. So you shall really teach with your actions without the need to speak, just to do. Just you are sitting there like masters in the ancient period. They just sit there. They don't even give answers because they are vibrating. You sit next to this guru, and the answer comes. You feel inside your heart. You understand it from a point of view which is not a physical. It is not your mind. It is not intellect. So it's reaching from the metaphysical level. And so this person that has developed a siddhi shall help you. And it's working within the silence that you are incapable of, let's say, understand, because it is silent. And so you think, because you are using the five senses, that there is nothing there. It's like there is no light, so it is invisible. And we know that all the energy, all the light of the stars in the space, and we think it is invisible, the space. In fact, it is not invisible at all. It is as bright as the whole number of the stars that exists, and we don't see it. Because we only see this energy when it's decelerating, it's creating a friction with our density. So it's not invisible, it's visible. We don't see it. And so we miss 99.9% of everything that exists in the universe. So this is maybe just to help to find out the right position, then we can build the instruments. What we were talking about with quantic interpretation of things is that these are singularities. So if we brought in as this variable consciousness, a machine, artificial intelligence wouldn't have this kind of sense. It does not own consciousness. That is the biggest, let's say, difference we can find out. So it's greatest. So this is the problem with the machine. The machine doesn't deeply know. It interacts. That's all. We know once we reach the exact equilibrium, so it matches. But this doesn't mean that if we follow the external world, and so instructions, culture, once we are doing what they told us to do, that is perfection. That is not perfection. That is the mold. So that is a clone. So that is the consequence of a function that is needed and has to be fulfilled for the material equilibrium of a world. But considering our soul, there is something wrong most of the time, because the soul knows. So we should follow what is the teaching of our soul, that is the inner voice, the truth that we really feel inside our heart. It is not an intellectual, it is not even, it can't be spoken, because words are cultural. They belong to that kind of interpretation.
Are you still there, Jedi?
That goal.
Sorry, I'm not sure if you broke up there or if you were done.
Yeah, hello.
Were you done for now, or did you have a disconnect there?
No, okay.
So
Just
is it okay, or how are you doing?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that.
So that is okay. The interpretation, let's say. Some
Yeah, that's
ways.
a good way to put it. And I agree with the things you're saying. I can definitely relate to that. It seems like
the problem with the replication in science, that we have to replicate all the time. So we need numbers, and we have to confirm the validity of these numbers in the equation. That is because all systems belong to this astronomical view. So we think that God created everything in this rhythmic way, and so that is the truth. And so we build every architectural temple and building like this. So it's 5,000 years, we still build them all in the same alignment, in the same proportions, in the same way, because we are following the example. So that is our mimicking. We are just trying to follow. And this, we call it divine, of course, divine proportion, phi, etc. All these numbers, which we understood, of course, because they belong to the internal vision and outer vision. So just take a look at the map. You get Winnipeg, you get Washington, you get New York, London, Paris, Luxor. Luxor. Now find out, just find out, and the numbers are there. Alignment is there. So that is to replicate. And so they are just using the triple principle of replication to impose that kind of energy field. It's all over the place. So we should just be conscious of this. It's happening in a physical and metaphysical way. So when I say that there is a dampening field, this means that our senses, let's consider sight. If we are looking at screens, now we have pixels, billions of pixels, of course. But if you are looking at a JPEG or MPEG image, it is a scrambled image, and 60–70% of it is non-existent. So the difference between your actual vision outside by using your eyes and the vision that you have looking at a screen, this will force your brain, your eyes to work at a lower, let's say, level. Now we do the same thing for food. And so you add artificial flavorings, and it's not natural at all, and you have a limited number of them. Then you do the same thing with sounds, and so you have again MP3. So it takes less space, of course, but there are no harmonics, so you cut off half of it. And all the information that is related to the higher frequencies, which goes right into the metaphysical space. So that is the dampening field. If you don't understand that someone is practicing this dampening field, not to give you the possibility to reach the 50 senses, and it is working to reduce our sensitivity. That is dangerous way to carry on a life with no conscience, because we are losing our sight. Because if we have a contrast of 1,000,000 to 1, and you are looking at your screen most of the time, let's say 4 hours a day, and there is ultraviolet frequency coming out of it, nobody cares. But you shall wear glasses, spectacles within 10 years. So we see that just go through statistics. I mean, what's happening in China? Children. At what age they start wearing spectacles? So no one is asking himself if this frequency, if this dampening field is acting in a, let's say, not negative, but by using it with no consciousness, if we are acting against ourselves. That is the question. So I believe that we should work on the spiritual side, the soul, the metaphysical, as well as with the physical part of it, and understand that halogen created a quantity of ultraviolet light. So they said they are dangerous again. And so they said, okay, we're just not using them anymore. Now we went towards these lamps, which are quicksilver. There is quicksilver. It is like a neon lamp, and they are still creating these effects. And there is ultraviolet, and there is magnetic at the same time. And magnetics from these lamps, they flow into the lines. They go back. They damage things and life itself. Nobody cares. So every year now we are changing lamps and bulbs and whatever. So it's just business. But we know that, I mean, we have been using the same old lamps for 100 years, and that was quite good. Maybe not even, it was very, a very good way. I mean, the first lamp they lit on, it's still shining. So it's 120 years, something like this. It will last. So there is no problem for environment. So what are we talking about? It's this is the point of view. We miss most of it because we are not conscious. And that is the consequence, that we fall asleep. And this, again, there is one word for this. This is called soma. It is called soma. It's very... Then Maya is what you call illusion. It's working just around us all the time. But that is the teaching. Soma is just fall asleep. Don't bother. Don't care. Don't ask. Use it. It's shining. It's nice. Very nice. It's shining. So it's... we must pay attention to little things.
Yep, really good point. Thank you, Jedi.
Thanks to you.
Any comments on that? Any spark anything for anybody? Or perhaps we're getting a bit tired here now. I know I am. I think I need to shut down here. But I appreciate your input there, Jedi. It's a good way to go out here with some elevating words on paying attention. I think that's a good theme to work on maybe in the next while and keep coming up. This idea of attention and how to use it. What part does it play in our experiments and in our interactions with ourselves and others? Pretty important. Okay, I think I'm going to shut things down for now. And thanks to everyone for interacting and participating today. And sorry again for the late start and the confusion there. There's a lot of technical difficulties to begin with, but at least we got things sorted out to carry on here. And pay attention to the Knowledge Seekers Workshop coming up Thursday at 9 a.m. Central European Time as usual. And I'm sure it'll be another workshop full of revelations, and more news from the Keshe Foundation from Mr. Keshe. Okie dokie, let's wrap for today. This has been the Plasma Reactor Group for Wednesday, November 7th, 2018. And those who do their experiments, if you can put them in the Plasma Scientific Journal format, that would be great. I see there's some new ones in the Plasma Journal that's now available too at the Keshe Foundation site. Nice to see more of our experiments written up as Plasma Scientific Journal entries. And we'll start accumulating the data that way. All right, let me end the